Okay, so you're thinking content repurposing sounds like a service that you could potentially offer for your business. So we need to talk about a couple of different approaches because just like virtual assistants, there are many different paths to getting into content repurposing, and there are many different types of content repurposing. First, and my favorite approach, is thanks to Gary Vee. It's called pillar content. And this means that you take one piece of high quality content that can be broken down into smaller pieces for distribution across various platforms. What Gary does is he takes that one piece and he finds infinite, it feels like, number of ways to break it down. He breaks it into tweets. He breaks it into Canva graphics. He breaks it into infographics. He breaks it into audio clips of him talking about it. He breaks it into video clips. He's always giving the audience something interesting, something valuable, but he's doing it in a way that it makes sense per platform. So he's taking his chapter from his book and he's writing about it in a long form post on LinkedIn. Or he's taking key insights and creating a Twitter thread. Or he's taking one key concept and he's turning it into a pin. Or he's turning that into an Instagram photo with a caption. So there's a lot of things that he could do. And I recommend that you adopt this pillar approach with your clientele if and only if your client has a lot of great content to pull from. So I will give you an example of how I used pillar content for one of my own clients. I am the former social media manager for John Doerr's Measure What Matters. John is known as the godfather of OKRs, which is a management system framework that he introduced to Google. So John's most famous piece of content is a book that he wrote about OKRs. And lucky for me, when I started working with John, he not only gave me access to this book, but he gave me access to a handful of long form video interviews that he did about the book. So he had a handful of pretty high quality filmed interviews that he had done about this book specifically. So I already had my pillar content right then and there. Now, next I had to ask John what his goals were, and his ultimate goals were pretty simple. They were to drive traffic to his Measure What Matters website, and they were to encourage people to buy his book. He was also platform agnostic at the time, meaning he didn't care which platforms I was involved in. So ultimately, I decided to go with LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And that's because a great majority of people who are reading the books are CEOs and entrepreneurs. And those CEOs and entrepreneurs who are reading the books are on LinkedIn. They are researching OKR how-tos on YouTube, and they are tweeting about business. Now, sometimes your clients will have opinions about what platforms they want you on, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes clients will already have a large presence on certain platforms that you may or may not be familiar with. And that's part of the joy of being a VA, is that you get to dive into these things headfirst and really learn about what makes certain content tick on those platforms. But sometimes clients won't care what you use. Sometimes they'll give you total carte blanche and be like, put my content out wherever you think it makes the most sense. It's really important at this point that you ask your client what their goals are, because their goals are going to inform what platforms you probably want them to be on. So for example, if your client wants to drive a lot of traffic to their site, like let's say, for example, you're working with a client who sells suitcases. That's a very visual product. They have a lot of photos already of their product. They probably already are involved on platforms like Pinterest, because that drives a lot of traffic, or Instagram, because that drives a lot of traffic. And so you'll probably want to continue to break down content pieces for those platforms. By the way, as a content repurposer, you might have insights that a certain platform is great for your client, but your client isn't using it. For example, I really wanted John Doerr to be on TikTok, and that was because I wanted him to start marketing himself to young up-and-coming managers. The next generation of the leaders are in the corporate world right now, and they're on TikTok. And I pitched that to him, and ultimately he was like, ooh, TikTok hard pass. So that kind of informed my decision to get him on YouTube, because I thought he's doing these video interviews already. I need to have a way to disperse short form videos, and if he doesn't want to do it on TikTok, then I thought YouTube was my next best bet. So there always is going to be some give and take when you're talking to your clients about their goals, where they want to be, how they want to grow, etc., etc. Don't be afraid to give your opinions though if they're not on certain platforms that you think that they should be on. So there are 5 basic steps to this pillar content when it comes to content repurposing. Your first step is to choose a pillar topic with your client. This means you and your client will choose a broad topic that your client's audience is interested in. For me and John Doerr, this was OKRs. For you and maybe that suitcase example client, it's selling suitcases. Maybe that broad topic then is travel. Once you have your broad topic selected, the second thing you'll want to do is choose a piece of pillar content. Now remember, the pillar content is one large, long-form, high-quality content that you can then break into pieces. This could be a long-form blog post. Maybe your client has already written a blog post about their suitcase empire, or maybe it's an interview that they did, or maybe it's an ebook. Again, for me, my pillar content was John's books on OKRs. Number 3, I need you to break it down. Once you have the pillar content, you need to break it down into smaller pieces that can be shared across various channels on various platforms. Each piece of content should focus on a specific aspect of the topic and provide valuable insights. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Step 3 is the most complicated step. It is the most time-consuming step because content repurposing does take some careful planning on your end. It means you really have to read through and understand this long-form piece of content. It's you taking the time to extract the most interesting or helpful pieces of information within that content, and then it's understanding how you want to best get those smaller pieces of content out there online. Here's realistically what step 3 looks like. Let's say, for example, your client's just done an online webinar where they've recorded a video of them talking about their suitcase. From that video, you can create a blog post. Maybe it's some of the features of their suitcase or why their product is better than others. Then take excerpts from that blog post that you wrote, and you can post short form posts on places like LinkedIn and Twitter. Then you can take quotes or stats, or you can make an infographic. By the way, you're taking these quotes and these statistics either from the video or from the blog that you've just created, and now you're just pulling those in a different format and you're making them more visual, and you're putting Canva quotes on Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. And step 5, you're taking that original webinar video and now you're just taking out 30 to 60 second clips. And I wanted to show you this cycle because I think it's the most visually compelling, probably visually realistic element of what step 3 looks like. Because all day I could just be like, okay, take this blog post and then break it down. And you might be like, I don't know what that looks like. So this cycle is like a rinse and repeat. Now, step 4 is learning how to optimize for each different platform. So it's no secret that a long-form video on YouTube does not perform as well on TikTok. That's because the video format is different. YouTube videos are long, horizontal. TikToks are short and vertical. So you'll want to make sure that each piece of content that you're creating from this pillar piece is optimized for the platforms that you plan to share it on. And finally, step number 5 and the last step is to track and measure what's working and what's not. You always want to measure each piece of content that you're putting out there for your client. Numbers are powerful, guys. And if you're not tracking what's performing well, what's not, what's getting the most clicks, then there's really no point in repurposing at all. Each platform, luckily for us, has their own analytics. Twitter has its own analytics page, LinkedIn has its own analytics page, YouTube, you name it, every platform has their own analytics page. So you can see exactly what types of posts people are engaging with. Maybe Canva graphics with a quote get better engagement and more clicks than just the quote that's written out itself. But you need to know exactly what's happening, because it's going to help you adapt your strategy and figure out what kind of content do you want to double down on versus what kind of content do you maybe want to not bother making anymore. And that's going to do 2 things for you. Number 1, content creation and repurposing, again, it takes a long time. So you don't want to be wasting your precious time on elements that aren't going to lead to clicks or sales for your clients. And number 2, if you are creating content that's not performing that well, your client probably doesn't want you doing that for the next 6 months because that's not going to lead to any sales for them. So those are the 5 steps of the pillar content. So that's just one strategy, by the way, pillar content. But there's also another strategy, If you have a current client, or maybe this is a service that you start offering and you land a new client that wants to hire you for content repurposing, but maybe they don't have one piece of high quality content. Like maybe you get a client who's like, here's 30 short form videos. Do what you will with these. You don't necessarily have one pillar to pull from. You have a lot of different smaller pieces. So that's where this second strategy comes from. Because in this case, the pillar content strategy is probably not going to work for you. I'm just going to call it your special sauce content strategy. This approach is about you figuring out which part of content creation really speaks to you. I think the special sauce approach is actually kind of cool because it's like you're giving yourself a niche within a niche. Here's an example. My biggest value add to content repurposing for my clients is video editing skills. I am really fast at editing videos. For example, I was able to take a 2-hour-long interview with John Doerr at Google and condense it into a 20-minute video with key takeaways pretty quickly. Then I took that 20-minute video and I was able to edit that down into various 40 to 60-second clips that I could upload as native LinkedIn or Twitter videos. But maybe your biggest value add to content repurposing is your writing. You're a really strong writer or blogger. Maybe you're able to take their video content or their smaller content and turn it into long form blog posts. And then from there, you have your own pillar content, break that up. Or maybe your strongest value add is graphic design. Maybe it's all three. Maybe you're a writer, editor, graphic design powerhouse. But whatever it is, what you want to do is really find your special sauce because that's the thing that you can focus on when it comes to content repurposing.